Hi, I'm Tamara Kandaker, and you're listening to The Decibel from the Globe and Mail. If you're a millennial in Canada who's into pop culture, MuchMusic was probably a big part of your youth. From its launch in 1984 to the late aughts, the TV channel was the place to go if you wanted to watch music videos, which at the time were one of the only ways to get to know your favorite artists and feel connected to them, and where the VJs that hosted the shows were knowledgeable and cool and felt like friends guiding you through the cultural conversations of the day. But then came YouTube and Vevo for music videos, and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram with never-ending content coming directly from the artists themselves, and we just didn't seem to need MuchMusic or music television in general anymore. By 2019, Much only had an hour of music content a day. And so when it was announced last month that Much was going to be relaunching, but on TikTok, a lot of us were excited. It meant a new generation of music fans would be introduced to one of Canada's most influential cultural brands.
It's about time. Welcome back, MuchMusic.
I'm so excited that MuchMusic is back, baby.
Hey, it's Chaos. Welcome back, MuchMusic.
Hey, we're Uptown Boy Band, and MuchMusic is back.
MuchMusic is coming back.
Tap in, make sure you stay in tune. Seeing what they got popping, you might even see me right there. Let's get it. Much love to y'all.
It's Quay, it's Cardinal, it's MuchMusic, let's go!
And TikTok, which is a very creative and music-centered social media platform, offered a lot of promise in terms of the kind of content we could expect to see.
The late 90s and the early aughts represent something so powerful to Gen Z and to millennials. And so for me, relaunching something like MuchMusic makes complete sense.
Emile Niazi is a culture writer in Toronto and showrunner for the CBC podcast Pop Chat. She recently wrote about the Much relaunch for the Globe, and she's here to talk about the nostalgia that millennials are feeling right now for the 90s and the early 2000s, and whether MuchMusic on TikTok is living up to the hype. You're listening to The Decibel. Hi, Emile. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for being here. Okay, so you are a millennial, so am I. I wonder if we can start by talking about your relationship with MuchMusic growing up. What did Much mean to you?
You know, Tamara, it really was so integral to my being as a young person that's sort of hard to sum up what it meant, especially to someone who's never experienced it before, because it's going to sound so foreign. But, you know, I have two younger sisters. The three of us watched MuchMusic all day long. It was just on in the background of whatever we were doing. The only way for me to know what was happening in the world and what was cool and what was like exciting was to watch MuchMusic. And so it was just the definition of youth culture to me, in many ways, because you could have access to pop music, you could have access to hip hop, you had access to punk, and these VJs, these kind of like larger than life personalities tied it all together and were really your guide into what was exciting and new and different. So yeah, I mean, I could honestly talk about it for hours and hours and hours, what it meant to me, but it really was access to different worlds in the same way that the internet is that portal for youth now. MuchMusic was that portal for me and people my age back then.
Yeah, totally. Like whatever your community was, you kind of find it on MuchMusic. I mean, we can keep talking about it a little bit more. What were some of your favorite moments? Like, give me some specific examples of what makes you nostalgic. I guess for people who didn't grow up with it or don't really know anything about what this thing was.
You know, there's some specific like shows and highlights for me. Like obviously when I was really little, my mom would watch Electric Circus, which again, this is going to sound so funny to someone who's never experienced it, but it was basically a dance party that they just broadcast on TV. And it was hosted by Monica Diol, who was South Asian, which was also very exciting for me because I was not used to seeing women who looked like me on television. So Monica was just like, wow,
Yeah.
Everything you wanted to be as like a little brown girl. And I remember in elementary school, I would get told I looked like her, and I don't look like her, but it was just like, you're brown, she's brown, you guys are the same.
Oh
so
my God.
that was very exciting at the time. So Electric Circle was a dance party. You got to see the inside the building of MuchMusic, which like just as much as the channel had this larger than life presence, the physical building in downtown Toronto, which was so far away from me in Surrey, BC, just felt like the pinnacle of like cool culture. It was like, wow, someday I'm going to live in that city and I'm going to go down there and I'll be on Electric Circus. And thank God I never did realize that dream. And then it was the countdowns. It was, just being able to watch which videos were cool and which bands were cool, and really getting to, and music videos at that point, because they were airing on TV, really felt like little cinematic masterpieces. You remembered the little bonus clip at the beginning. You remembered which like Hollywood star made a cameo in Paula Abdul's video or Alanis Morissette's video. You really watched for those things to be the first one so you could talk about it at school the next day. Like it was that level of excitement.
Totally. I feel like it was one of the only ways to connect with the artists that you like. This was before the age of social media, where like artists are getting on these platforms and talking to you, but music videos were kind of the only way at the time to get inside their heads, I guess.
100%. It was the sort of like only way to intimately know your favorite band and your favorite pop star. And it was sort of that the way fandoms were built.
Yeah. And like you wrote in your column, it was totally like the barometer of cool. I feel like a lot of people will relate to that. So what did you think when you heard that the channel was going to be revived, but on TikTok?
I was really excited, actually, because it's not like, interest in music videos has waned at all. You can just look at the streaming numbers on Vevo and YouTube. Billions of people watch a new artist's video when it comes out. So it's sad to me that there isn't, a more kind of mainstream place on terrestrial, television to watch that. So I was excited, and I really was hopeful that because TikTok is inherently so music focused and such a brilliant creative space for people who love music, and for music to get resurfaced, find new audiences, go viral. I just thought, what a perfect match. So I was actually really quite hopeful because of that nostalgia, but also because of my, sort of interest in how TikTok really can be a home for music.
Yeah. Can you just maybe explain that for people who aren't on TikTok? What role does music play on the platform, and why do you say it's like a music-focused platform?
Well, TikTok actually started as a lip syncing app called Musical.ly. So, young people would get on there and they would do lip syncs and sort of choreograph dances to their favorite songs. So that's really, the core of the app is that shared love of music. And then, of course, it turned into TikTok. It grew. Now it's this massive platform. But what goes viral on TikTok are choreographed dances to hit songs, but also to songs from the past that suddenly get, hit the Billboard charts once again. Lots of people have become superstars through sharing their songs and their original music on TikTok. Some of its biggest stars are dancers and singers. Charli D'Amelio.
Hello, everyone. It is Charli, and on December 1st, I have my very own book coming out. It is called Essentially Charli, and it goes into the details about my life.
People like that. So for all of its creative uses, at its core, it's music that connects people across that platform. And so, of course, it's such a natural fit.
So what were you hoping the Much relaunch would actually look like on TikTok? Like, what did you want to see them do with it?
I really wanted them to use the app and what it has been doing so natively with music, and what the creator community has done with TikTok and how they have used it and how they have shaped it and molded it. Because it is one of those apps where you really can't just, as a traditional broadcaster, come in and plop down your content. You really do need to utilize all of its tricks and turns. And that's only going to come from someone who's been there and using it every day and using it and manipulating it and being excited by it. And so that's just unfortunately not what they've done. It feels like what happened when we did sort of hit that digital age and old broadcasters were struggling to use social media and not sure what to put on there. So, I don't think it's necessarily that they are bad at what they're doing. I just think what they're doing is not right for the platform.
Yeah. I mean, I was looking through their TikTok feed today and I actually totally agree. You wrote that some of the TikToks feel kind of like gimmicky, charmless snippets, and they feel more like promos for something longer and more entertaining. Can you just, unpack that for me? Like, what do you mean by that?
I get a little taste of all of the VJs' personalities through these little clips where they're talking about their favorite karaoke songs.
Go-to karaoke song.
That's hard, bruh.
And sometimes when we touch, the honesty is too much. Shout out to my Filipinos.
I wanna swing from a chandelier.
Or they are figuring out the lyrics of a Doja Cat song.
What if you had me lying on your ding? On your ding? That line is crazy. I cannot lie. How they play this on the radio, bruh? God damn it with your friends.
And you get a little bit of it. And then because of the time constraints of TikTok, you don't get all of it. And it sort of left me very confused because there's nowhere to watch the longer version. And that's what felt to me like, they're not using the platform the way it's meant to be used. They're using it like you would if you were a television producer looking to create promo material for your show. Unfortunately, there's no show, there's no after. So you're sort of left wanting more. And I think that just turns people off the app, because of what we've seen people be able to do with TikTok. I've seen people create, it feels like an entire movie, in those few seconds. So again, it did feel charmless and it did feel gimmicky. And I think that's mostly because it doesn't feel right for the platform.
So what did you think of the timing of this launch? Because it's happening as older millennials are reaching middle age, and it seems like there's a lot of nostalgia happening right now around the 90s.
Yeah, like you said, the eldest of the millennials are starting to turn 40. We are hitting middle age. I know that's such a scary word, especially for people who've been defined by their youth. And then for Gen Z, it's interesting because they're also quite nostalgic for the early aughts. So both generations who are on this platform at the same time are both experiencing this nostalgia for a simpler time, for a pre-digital, pre-social era. It's pre-9/11. It's pre the recession. It's pre-pandemic. It really is a yearning for a simpler life. And we're experiencing it together, these two generations on this app. And so I think it is really interesting. The late 90s and the early aughts represent something so powerful to Gen Z and to millennials. And so for me, relaunching something like MuchMusic, it makes complete sense to launch right now as we're coming out of the pandemic, as we're sort of searching for a new way forward, a new normal. Why not bring back comfort?
Do you think the pandemic has intensified this feeling of nostalgia for the 90s?
100%. So many people that I was talking to at the very beginning. So going back to last March, what was getting us through? It was music, and it was not new music. It was the 90s. Everyone was like reaching back deep into those playlists from high school. I certainly instantly was like, I need to hear Tori Amos right now. I need to hear Hole. I need to hear Courtney Love. I need to scream. I felt like I was a teenager trapped in my bedroom again. So,
Totally.
And I think that just amplified in a different way throughout the year as we were sort of caught in this weird, liminal space of not knowing where to go and how to move forward. And so, yes, in those moments is when we do reach back for safety and for comfort. And, Craig Jenkins from The Vulture wrote this great piece about the sort of this sad yearning for the 90s and the early aughts. And he, sort of touched on these exact themes and really did hit how right before 2001, it was a boom period. You know what I mean? We were coming out of like really strong economic times. Culture felt very alive. There was certain, in a way it was sort of homogenous. We all had access to the same things because access was so limited. And then suddenly everything changed with 9/11 and with George Bush. And suddenly we were caught in endless wars, and really sort of divisive political times and very difficult economic times. And so that intensity of change, that really like sharp marking of the before and after times, which I think is very similar to the before and after the pandemic, naturally creates this sort of sense of longing for something that existed before.
Yeah, that's so interesting. This just reminded me of the episode of the New York Times podcast, Still Processing, about bridges in songs. So Wesley Morris makes the argument that the reason why people love the Olivia Rodrigo song Driver's License so much is that there is a bridge in it, which you don't really hear too often in pop songs anymore. And because we've all been so miserable during this pandemic, people are nostalgic for that kind of music that you can belt out and have no shame. And Driver's License is that kind of song. And I just thought that was really interesting.
I cry every time I sing Driver's License in the car. It doesn't matter. I am almost 40 years old. I have 2 children. I've been married for almost 10 years. I have to reach deep to access that reserve. But every time I sing it, I'm just like, I can't talk to anyone for a while. That is an album for a very specific generation, but it is millennial women that lifted that album into virality. So I think that is really interesting too, because she is utilizing such a specific nostalgic format that really does speak to women of a certain age.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so older millennials might get mad at me, but I'm asking because we've seen all these debates online where Gen Zers are telling millennials, like, you can't have a side part anymore, skinny jeans are not cool anymore. I was just thinking, like, is this maybe a last grasp for cultural relevance before Gen Z takes it all away from us?
Yeah, it's sad, isn't it? But you know what? I think it's interesting that so much of that commentary about side parts and skinny jeans and loving Olivia Rodrigo was really directed at women, at women in their mid to late 30s, because that is a demographic that historically, as soon as they turn a certain age, are left out of culture, are left out of the conversation. So, of course, we're putting up a last stand. Of course, we're saying we're still here. We're still relevant. We are on this app too. We are engaging in culture too. Don't forget about us. And I think what's really unique about this moment in history and this moment in culture is that we are talking to each other. The generational divide in terms of who can access what no longer exists. We all have access to the same music, the same television shows. We talk about the same movies. We fight over it on Twitter and on TikTok and on Facebook. And historically, that conversation has never been so exciting and divisive and public and loud. And so I think that's actually really good for culture. And I think it's really good that we're challenging each other and that we're embracing the same things and fighting over certain things, whether it's MuchMusic or MTV or a different brand that really capitalizes on all of our yearning for life before things got very, very complicated in our world. Climate change is always on our mind. The racial reckoning that is happening right now, the need for greater awareness of social justice issues, the fact that we're coming out of a pandemic. This is just all very ripe for a really exciting cultural moment, but it's also a time where we are desperate for simplicity and comfort. And so I think that this is just the beginning of a huge wave of nostalgia. And I think we're going to be seeing a lot more brands like MuchMusic reemerge for the digital age and for the social age. So, I'm sure we'll be having this conversation again in 6 months because, both of our generations are looking for a way to go back, a way to get back to when things felt easy. And that is going to be a really interesting question for culture and for politics as we move forward out of this pandemic.
Okay, Emil, you've given us a lot to think about. Thank you so much, and please come back anytime.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me. I always love talking to you.
That's it for today. I'm Tamara Kendacker. Our producers are Madeline White and Kasia Mihailovich. David Crosby edits the show, and Angela Pacenza is our executive editor. Thank you so much to Emil Niazi. You can find her on Twitter at AMIL. If you want to reach us, email us at thedecibel@globeandmail.com and tell us what you think about the show. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.